I suppose it's about 3 years ago, in the sense that I was talking to the writer. I've worked with him before, Peter Arnott, and so know him well. And I think, as I remember, I was sort of talking to him about doing a new version of a classic piece. And then he mentioned this story of Propaganda Swing. And it seemed to me like a riveting story, you know, and I hadn't heard it before. It was all brand new to me. And so I commissioned the play, and Peter went ahead, wrote it, and we've done about 4 drafts. And it's taken us about this long to get it into rehearsal shape. Well, it picks up from Cabaret, the Candor and Ebb musical, in the sense that that's set when Berlin's cabaret and club scene was booming, and Berlin at the time was the biggest centre for cabaret and jazz in Europe. And Cabaret ends just as that's beginning to turn sour, as the Nazis begin to take a grip on the politics of the day. And it picks up from there in the sense that the Nazis are fully in control. They've banned jazz music. They've eliminated any music played that was written by Jewish composers. You weren't allowed to stand up to play the sax. You weren't allowed to syncopate. It was all being forced into a sort of German Papa. And so in a way that's where it picks up from Cabaret. I mean, it's just a fascinating story. The story of these jazz musicians who had been closed down, weren't able to play the music they adored, they loved, and that they were picked up by the propaganda ministry and put into Lord Haw Haw's propaganda broadcasts. And that was the only way they were able to find music, get the new music, travel across Europe to get the sheet music and play it properly, all in the context of that propaganda broadcast, to provide the light entertainment for their propaganda. And what they did was they then rewrote the lyrics to some of the most popular jazz songs of the day into vicious, nasty, anti-Semitic, full of hate lyrics, which were then put out to these popular tunes. And that in itself seems to be a fascinating story, and one that I hadn't heard before. But I suppose what's interesting is that in a way the music won, because that band became the biggest band in Europe after the end of the war, you know, with hits like Lena Marlena. So in a way it's about how the music won through and how artists were forced to respond to the circumstances they found themselves in, whether it was right or wrong to engage with these propaganda broadcasts, whether the music was more important than the politics. All those reverberate, I think, today. The show is a co-production with Nottingham Playhouse. It follows their show, Charlie Peace, that played here, and the advantages of co-production are really, it's less for a director as such, more for an artistic director. It's a way to be able to get work of a certain scale, new work, and what happens is that both theatre companies share the creation cost, which is the big cost of the thing, is the creation cost. So we share that, So the risk for either of us is halved, if you know what I mean, in terms of the money invested in the show. But it also, by definition, sort of doubles the reach to audiences as it plays both here and in Nottingham. And those are at the heart of the advantages. And if the truth be told, almost all work that's done now has to be co-produced following the cuts that have been landing for the last few years. And particular co-production for new work as audiences become more risk averse. So a title that's unheard of with no particular names in it is risky to do these days, and you can share the risk with another producing house. Is in short the advantage. Just about to go into casting, which is actually one of the most nerve-wracking periods, because in the next few days I will be making offers to actors, and therefore that will be the company. So there's something sort of definitive about it, if you know what I mean. You've got what your cast is. And in this occasion it's a bit more complicated because I need a company of actor musicians. And they need to be pretty high class musicians as well as high class actors, because this is intricate music and the music's at the heart of the production. And to be honest with you, I've never really worked with a company of acting musicians before, so I don't quite know what lies ahead of me. But what I do know is that considerable amounts of rehearsal period are going to have to be put aside to learn the songs, to play the jazz, and to try to recreate the band sound of the jazz in those days. And that's the trick. So we'll have to see how I get on over the next few days, but I need actors who can play trumpet, trombone, clarinet, guitar, strings, so that's what I'm going to be looking for. I think the main objective really is to find to make a spectacular piece of theatre. There's a live jazz band, as I've just described, playing some of the greatest music of its era, and I think what's interesting about it, despite the sort of darkness of the nature of the story, there's huge amounts of humour in there. So, and at the heart of the play, it is very theatrical in the sense that it's all been set in a radio studio. So it's a very theatrical context to tell this story, and the show will never leave that studio. You're going to have people that are doing sound effects, Foley sound effects, which is when they do it by hand, you know, the man-made sound effects. So we're going to recreate a radio studio in the 1930s, 40s, and tell this amazing story through live music.